Hey everyone, welcome back to Bridge Stories. You are listening to Season 2. If you're new to our podcast, this is our place where we just sit down and give people space and time to tell stories of how they've encountered God and been changed by Him. This season we're going to be sitting down with some familiar faces to many of you, and we hope that you'll get a little deeper glimpse into who they are and the things that God has brought them through. We're also excited to get to introduce you to some new people, some people with some incredible stories to share of how God has provided and encouraged them and helped them to live out a life of faith. We hope that these stories encourage you and challenge you in your faith as you walk closer to Jesus than ever before, as you seek Him with all of your heart. So sit back and enjoy and be encouraged as you listen. With that, let's jump in. All right, here we go. Episode 2, Season 2. Jimmy, thanks for coming on the Bridge Community Church podcast.
Thank you for having me, Andy.
It's kind of weird, even after a full season of doing it, to think that we have a podcast.
I think it's a great idea. I think it's awesome. It's fun to watch, too.
I think it's been a cool conversation starter when people will be like, you do a podcast? I thought you work at a church.
Yeah.
People in my neighborhood will say that, and I'm like, well, churches can have podcasts. And it's
right.
Almost like, oh, I didn't know that was possible.
Well, we have a lot to share, right?
Yeah. I think I'm excited about this. I was thinking about you because more than any other person I've ever interviewed on the podcast, I know the most about you. I feel like we've probably talked at least once a week for 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, and I mean, you're like a really good friend of mine and my pastor, one of my pastors, and you probably know a lot of my insecurities better than anybody else, so it's kind of funny that you would ask me on. So one up to you. Thank you.
Yeah. I think I'm excited to jump into it because I think I've noticed as I interview people, even people I feel like I know pretty well, it only takes a few minutes to get to the point of like, well, wait a second, I had no idea.
Yeah.
So I think the encouragement to people who listen, and I've told people this, is in an hour or an hour and a half conversation, if you just set aside the time, you have no idea what amazing things you can learn about people. Mm-hmm. How strange it is in the world we live that you could go to church every Sunday, you could go to work every day and know of people, but not know them at all.
Yeah.
So why don't you, as we wait for our coffee to cool, by the way, total shout out to Brenton Fessler, senior pastor at Refuge OC. He donated this coffee. He was on the last episode, and the coffee was so bad, he decided he needed to fix it. So he donated this coffee to us.
My man, another fellow coffee snob.
Yeah. I could tell you that story offline, but just tell us about you. Where'd you grow up? What was kind of your things as a kid? What'd you like to do? All that kind of stuff.
I grew up all over Southern California. We moved around a lot. My parents were separated like before I was born, basically. So there's a lot of conflict between them, like in my younger years. But I was born in Orange, and then my mom moved us around all over, from like Escondido, Ramona, San Clemente. Like we hit all the cities, Garden Grove. We lived a little bit of everywhere, and then I kind of like, I guess, other than the moving around a lot, kind of a normal Southern California vibe, like. Southern California is really cool. There's like this really amazing opulence, or American opulence probably. I don't know. Like there's all this like a lot of fun, and you get to do all these different things like surf or go to the beach or go to the mountains or party or whatever, and success is always at the forefront, so it's like just trying to fit in wherever we went, and the different cultures and stuff. So like Ramona was way different than like San Clemente, like a little
big time
little farming area versus San Clemente. And I don't know. It was an interesting childhood, I guess.
And when you say we traveled around, was it just you and your mom? I know you have a brother, so who was we?
Well, at the beginning it was, so I have 3 sisters and 1 brother. My oldest sister, she kind of took off and moved to NorCal when I was really young. She was around for a little bit, but I don't remember a lot of it because I was super young. And then my other sister, who's 3 years older than me, she was around for the whole ride, And then my mom's, I think it was her second marriage, my brother and and my youngest sister, that they came into the picture a little bit later. They're like 10 years younger than me. So while we were running around Southern California with my mom, me and my older sister, she met my like stepdad, I guess. I don't like calling him that, but Edmundo, met him, and then they got married, had a couple kids. So then comes in my brother Mike and my sister Marlena.
Got it. And were you primarily moving based on like her work or what she was doing for a job or what?
Well, my mom had a lot of trouble with men and finances, and I think it was chasing either one of the two. Just kind of how life will take you from one place to the other, and she would have a problem at a job or whatever, and then have to go somewhere else and look for another job. So I think it was more that than I don't think she was actually like chasing work, is trying to survive, single mom.
Yeah, totally. And a lot of people who are going to listen to this know your dad. So where's your dad at this point?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't entirely know. I think there was like, I don't know the timeline for what he was doing at certain times when he wasn't around. I do think there was a prison stint, there was a little vacation for him. And then, I think that he was just out like doing his own thing, my dad's always been kind of a carefree person, so it's like I think he was living carefree, doing what he was doing, and just focused on what was in front of him during that time. And then I can remember when he came back into the picture, I think I was in like 3rd or 4th grade, maybe 5th grade, something like elementary school. I lived out in Marietta, off of Marietta Hot Springs Road, when there was nothing out there. It was the stick. There was nothing. It was.
I still feel like it's the sticks.
Yeah, we had a Lucky's.
Sorry, Marietta.
We had a Lucky's and Chuck E. Cheese.
Lucky's is an old supermarket.
Yes, and that was it, And then they were actually building everywhere, so there's always construction noise and stuff like that. But so I had a birthday at a Chuck E. Cheese, and I remember him showing up with a dirt bike for my birthday.
Like a legit dirt bike.
Like a legit dirt bike, came out of nowhere, like he didn't see him that much, or get any time with him really, and he shows up with a dirt bike, and I was like super stoked for the dirt bike, but it was like way too big for me to ride, and
not a totally good idea of how big a 4th or 5th grader is.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, that was when, and then from that point, he started coming into the picture again more and more. And then around, I think like 7th or 8th grade, I moved back with my dad. So I went from my mom, I think about at the end of elementary school, I left living with her. And my dad like offered a little bit more stability at this point. Like he was doing well financially, or better than my mom at least.
Yeah.
I don't know about well, but better than her. So that like kind of drew us in. My sister left first. She left first to go stay with him. And then I kind of followed suit, and then we had a wild time living with my dad. It was my dad was a party guy, and liked to do things like that, and so it was like encouraged at our house, like.
Oh, it wasn't just like happening, it was encouraged.
Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes it was like, what are you doing? Don't do that. And then I'm going to go do it, kind of a thing.
And I mean, you don't have to share all the details, but like what kind of stuff are we talking and at what age?
I remember when I was like in 6th grade and I saw the bad relationship that my mom and my dad had, and how like drugs and alcohol like played a part in that, and how like you would see them at one point in the day and they would be like good people to talk to and be around and fun and all that, and then you would see them at another stage and see how like they were totally warped, and it was like kind of wicked,
Yeah.
And you could see that as a kid because you're pure and you can see the bad stuff coming in, and I noticed that and I was like, dude, I never want to do that. I never want to pollute myself like that. And so anyway, then, but I think that like the high aspirations of wanting to do that and then just being in an environment that when that's the only thing that people are doing, it's kind of too hard to kind of distance yourself from it, So I think that like I started doing like stuff in that realm at like the end of 8th grade, Probably a little too afraid of it before then.
Just like smoking pot and drinking.
Yeah, smoking pot, drinking, whatever.
Where were you going to school? You said you were in Orange.
At that point, I went to Yorba, Yorba Middle School.
Yeah.
We lived off of Waverly and right by California Elementary. So I was walking to school down Cambridge every day.
So wild.
And then so wild, dude. Now I'm going to church right down the street. So I'd walk to school there, and there was it was really cool because I felt like kind of free, in middle school, because my dad was gone before I woke up in the morning. I'd get myself ready. I'd head out to school. I'd show up when I wanted to. I'd leave when I'd wanted to, and nobody cared. Nobody said anything until you get caught. And then I think from skipping school and stuff like that, I got caught around at the end of 8th grade, and they were like, "You got to go." And then I went to Peralta over here.
Okay.
And then they ended up kicking me out over there because I was on like a zero tolerance policy, And then I think I didn't even finish out 8th grade, but Elmo was kind enough to let me go over there and just start high school.
The kind folks over at Elmo, shout out.
Yes.
So you go into high school, but it's so often, and it's even my experience, is a lot of the stuff you're describing about partying or smoking pot or drinking and all that stuff. A lot of that stuff gets introduced to kids as they get older into high school, but it was already part of your life.
Yeah, and I think that I never really had like a good community of people around me, So it's like the people that are partying, are willing to like go out and get people that are straggling around,
Yeah.
And then I had like a really good friend on Cambridge. I walked by his house all the time, and I used to love playing basketball, and he was out in front playing basketball, and that's how we became friends. We started playing one-on-one, and his mom kind of became my mom, and I love her to death, but like they kind of valued the party scene too,
Oh, okay.
So it's like that's what everybody does, right?
Was there any part of your mind where like this is not what adults do? Because it sounds like you're surrounded by a lot of adults that are influencing you, that are kind of telling you the opposite, like this is just what adults do.
No, I think that there's like an unobtainable like people out there, like there's people that are good, but I don't know them, and they're like somewhere else, Yeah,
because you had mentioned like you were seeing your mom and dad kind of easy to get along with, and then a few hours would pass and they were not people you wanted to be around at that time, and you had said that I don't want that for myself. I don't want to be like that. But then you kind of jumped into that and became that a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
So at least you had an idea of like you could be something.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess walk me through high school, and then I'm just curious. Was there any bit, even in the midst of all of these stories, was there any church exposure, VBS that you got taken to, anything like that?
No, there was like a little bit of church exposure for me though. My grandma was like a faithful Christian, right? She'd go to church every Sunday. I always call her like the rock of the family, like she's an old school lady that just built different back then, She was awesome, and she attended church religiously, and every once in a while, like my dad would get on a kick where he wanted to go to church, and we would go to church, and we went to, I think it's called Calvary over on Tustin and 17th. Mm-hmm. We'd go to like a Sunday school, that was like an offshoot of the church. It was like his name was Chuck Smith. He was like the guy, the chaplain for the Anaheim Angels. So every once in a while we'd go for that, and I would remember he would like tell a joke that was funny at the beginning of the sermon, and then I'd be like, "What are we doing here?" And I one of the cool things I do remember about going there probably about, I wouldn't say more than 20 times throughout high school, is when the service was over, the sun would be coming up, and they would lift up the projector, and they had a stained glass window behind, and the light coming in through that was awesome. So I don't remember a whole lot of the word being preached or anything like that. I just remember his jokes in the beginning, everybody laughing. and then checking out until I couldn't wait for the light to come through the stained glass window, you know?
Oh, so you're going like the early service.
Yeah, yeah.
The sun was just coming through. So what was high school like for you?
High school was cool. It was it was like a kind of an odd experience in some ways. High school is when I really started like doing drugs like almost like daily, you know, smoking weed and drinking a lot, and doing a little bit of extra stuff besides that every once in a while. And I remember that like I loved playing basketball, and I played football, and being a part of sports and all that was cool. I like the camaraderie of football, you know, it was fun. But I also was like, my buddy that I met on Cambridge went to high school with me, and we partied together a lot, you know. And his house was actually being Cambridge is the front side of Orange High. So when I was at Orange High, because I got kicked out of Elmo, and then I went to Orange High. So when I was at Orange High, we would hop the fence and go hang out in his backyard because it was bordering the school, and just drink or do stupid things and then go back to school. So I don't know. I always had a problem with authority. Probably still do, if I'm telling the truth. But I never really trusted adults because I met a lot of them, and going through all those different schools and everything. And I think that like all authority figures, like they meant well, but they're not really they don't really care, you know? Like it's just their job to be there. It's not like, and they act like they mean well, but they don't really, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
That's how I kind of felt about people. So I guess I was like a little bit of rebelling and just partying and pushing the envelope in like a kind of an evil way, I guess. I don't know, like partying and having fun and stuff like that, and not really doing what is right.
Yeah.
You know?
So you kind of enter adulthood from there. And I know quite a bit of your story from there, but where do you go from high school, and then maybe just paint a picture of like what happens after high school, and then the events that lead to anybody who knows you now and doesn't know any of what you just said is going to be blown away that that's true about you.
Yeah.
Because they know that you know Jesus, and everywhere you go, Jesus is in you. So for people who are probably going to listen and be like, what? I had no idea. How do you get from what you've described so far? You enter adulthood. So what is young adulthood like on its way to a radical?
Well, so like after high school, things got really bad for me. Like I would say, I would say like they got really, really dark. So after high school, like there was a time at the end of high school, they come in and they test you, and they're like, oh, you should go in the military. And then I was playing football still, and OCC was like, oh, come play football here. And I was like, okay, like I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. I have no idea what I want to do. But I'm just really into doing stupid things, you know, drinking, partying, stuff like that. Like I very much inherited an addictive personality from my parents. So like if a little bit of good feeling is good, you know, you might as well give me a lot, you know? Yeah. So I started doing a lot more drugs, like harder drugs, did almost everything that there, you know, was available. And so I was going to a junior college. I went to OCC, and then I was at a party. I got in a fight, and someone was trying to like stab me, and they cut the tendons in my left arm. So then I quit football at OCC and like kind of gave up on all that and on any athletic career, you know. And that was probably the one thing that I was holding on to being okay, you know, not going
like
completely
no matter
off
how hard I'm going to party, I still have to show up to football.
Yeah. Like, so playing some part of like, you know, structure in my life. And then without that, like, it was just like, well, whatever, nothing to hope for, you know?
Yeah.
There's no future that I really care to see, you know? So it's just like, everything was just like instant gratification kind of a thing from there on. So I really like, I became friends with some drug dealers and some people that made it easy for me to do stuff, you know, and just kind of bounced around at dumb dead-end jobs in the process, you know?
Kind of stuff.
Like, so one of my first jobs was doing home mortgages at like originating calls, right? So I'd call people from Lending Tree,
Okay.
you know? And so it's like being like cold calling people from 10 to 7 every day, you know? And that job was like not fun, right? It's like being locked in a building during the brightest hours of the day didn't sound good to me, but I did that for a while. And then I was a sandwich artisan at Pavilions for a while. I think that was even before that job. And then things got kind of rough. I met I already knew my son's mom, but we like started to date, and I started working at Bed Bath & Beyond. Me and my dad got in a fight, so like he wasn't around anymore, and I was sleeping on my mom's floor, and I got a job at Bed Bath & Beyond and a job at a turf company, synthetic grass company, when it was like getting big, and this was like in 2005 or something like that. Mm-hmm. Like a couple years after high school, just really not going in any good direction. And I was like taking some classes at community college too, and then that kind of, I lost interest in that because there was no real hope for me anywhere there either. So then I got really, really bad in like drugs, where I was just doing it every day, you know, like, and I was living in Rancho Santa Margarita, where they were everywhere. It was like, it's a lot of like, I don't even what they're called anymore, but there was a lot of stuff that was probably going down that was kind of destroying me, like in a major way.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but in the moment of doing all that, was there ever like reflection, like I'm destroying myself, or was it like I'm destroying myself and I don't care, or what was going through your mind?
It was like destroying myself and I don't care kind of a thing, because it's like I didn't see the reason for anything else, you know, like I didn't have I didn't want to, like, I wasn't going to be a pro like football or basketball player. I didn't know what the point of anything really was for me, you know. I didn't think that I was capable of achieving anything with my life per se, and I didn't really have motivation to. It's really just like I was hopeless, you know. Like there was nothing really to live for me, and I was getting to the point where I was like doing a lot of cocaine. I was just doing drugs every single day, right? And then at that point, Jaden was conceived, and that kind of changed things for me, because if you remember earlier in my life, I didn't want to be like my parents, right? Mm-hmm. And then that was like when I was like, okay, like I'm going to stop for a little bit so I can be a good influence in his life. And I think that the time that Jaden came around, it literally was like at the pretty much the bottom of the barrel, like of my body couldn't take anymore, you know? Mm.
And how old were you at that point?
23.
Okay.
So that basically after high school, it just got worse and worse for 5 years, I guess. And then when Jaden was coming, I got in trouble with the law a little bit, and then I also had to go into a program, which double helped, right? Where I wasn't allowed to do anything. They were like drug testing, breathalyzing, all that stuff all the time. And that lasted like a year. So then like I didn't do anything bad for like a year. Started thinking a little more clearly. Jaden was doing great, you know, and it was kind of good with him. Excuse me. I got out of that program though. And then I just started slowly going back down, you know, kind of the rabbit hole of
was it a feeling like you just didn't know any other way?
Yeah, I do think that, and also it's just like you're just chasing a feeling, you know, like a euphoria that you don't get from life, you know. I'm not someone that does really well with mundane things, you know. Like I like challenges and stuff that like push me, and that's where it was easiest to find, you know, like, sadly, you know, and so, yeah.
Yeah. So I have one question, then I want to talk to you about the season of life where you meet your wife.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, so most people, at least around Bridge, know that you own your own construction company.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any exposure to working construction at this point in your life?
Well, yeah, my dad, he had a construction company. So when I started living with him, he was like starting to get established in what he was doing. But also I when he was doing it, I was like, I never want to do that. I don't want anything to do with it.
Was it the physical demands? Was it just you felt like it was monotonous or what?
It was probably the physical demands are part of it, and then I don't know. I probably just didn't have the best relationship with my dad either. So it was like it wasn't like he was like, look at this wonderful thing I'm doing.
Yeah.
It was like, it kind of sucked going to work with him and stuff. So I knew a little bit about it back then. And then I started working for a turf company when I was like going through it. And that's like another step in that direction of just labor, and then after that, I ended up just working for construction company after construction company. It's kind of like the path of least resistance, maybe. So
I'm sure that we'll tie that knot off when we get down the road a little bit. But so just kind of briefly tell us what leads up to meeting your wife, Sam. Most people know her. Some people will watch this that have no context, but where do you go from Jaden being born to meeting your now wife?
Yeah, so Jaden was born when I was 23, and I was like down in the dumps. I was like, I had no hope, and it was just like I was probably a really bad person to be around. And then I met my wife when I was 26. So about a year before I met my wife, I don't even know how long, me and Jaden's mom split up. And I was just living on my own, and I was, going further down the hole again, and just living for the day, and not really having a whole lot of purpose, Yeah. Just trying to keep myself together for when Jaden was around and I was taking care of him. But other than that, like I didn't have any hope or a future or anything like that I looked for, I didn't have anybody that I wanted to build anything with or do anything with, and I was just living for the moment, I guess you could say, and not even good at that, So I would
write that down for future pastoral counseling. Man, you're just living for the moment, and you're not even good at it.
Yeah. Oh man, it sucks because I wasn't good at anything. Like I just wasn't, and it kind of bummed me out. That I just I don't know. Maybe it was a depression that came along with it. And really the only thing that would ever uplift me was some cash to go have fun, But I was living off of Almond and Chapman and Maine over here, right down the street, in a garage that was converted into an apartment with Jaden. Well, I had him for a week, and then he'd go to his mom's for a week and stuff. So we were trading off. And I was just like barely living, barely making it by. Barely enjoying anything, just not living at all, really,
Yeah.
Kind of a miserable person, just doing well physically, health-wise, and all that, and just destroying myself, It's kind of the only thing that, like, oddly enough, gave me any joy was destroying myself. Which is weird, right?
Yeah.
But then, so then. That was like, when I was like, there was times when I was like, there's nothing really to live for,
Yeah.
And then I met my wife one night, and I don't even remember meeting her because that would probably be like most of my nights. I didn't remember a whole lot of anything, going on. That whole from high school to 26 was a blur, except for that year of like almost sobriety that I had when Jaden was born.
Yeah.
So like it was all kind of a blur, but I know that there was no value in me that I could see, and I just had no hope.
So you meet Sam. I mean, I know some of these stories, and if people don't know, your wife has also been a guest on the podcast, so I think she's told this story. But tell us your version of the first couple of times you met Sam. You said the first time you met her, you don't really remember it. She remembers it well, by the way.
Yeah, because she's a good person. Well, I guess I should back up and say that during this time, my dad was going to this church when I was living on Almond. So he was like balking at me all the time about Jesus, and like I'm like, dude, you've just turned 50 and you've lived this whole and he's all cleaned up and he's like all full of the Lord and happy and coming over, and I'm like, bro, I saw you for years doing the opposite. Why are you bugging me? I'm young.
Is there I'm just curious. So you watched your dad do a lot of partying and kind of put that into your kind of vision of what life was like, but was there, when he started following the Lord, was there any piece of like, wow, maybe there is hope? Because if there's hope for him, there's hope for me? Or was it more resentful, like, who's this guy trying to tell me what to do?
It's just, I don't think that it was either, like it was like, for me, I was just like, I love my dad, and even though like everybody has their faults, right? And I do have some resentments, like I did at least have some resentments. I probably still do have some resentments, but I don't think that like, as far as like walking with the Lord had any play on it. I just didn't have anything tangible with the Lord, like, like I didn't have, like all the stuff he was talking about. I'm like, oh, great for you, buddy. But like, I have no hope. I'm glad you have hope, Yeah. I wouldn't say that to him, but that's like how I felt. Like, I'm glad you are so on fire and you have a relationship with your friend, but I don't know him,
Yeah.
He hasn't spoken to me like that or whatever. So I'm living the way I'm living, So yeah. And I was like kind of fighting with him every once in a while when he would swing by and talk to me for a little bit. And then he was off wherever he went, and he would just always come and be like, I can't wait for you to be with the Lord. Kind of a thing.
So whether you liked it or not, your wife, you meet a woman, and in some ways, Jesus comes crashing into your life through her. Is that more or less true?
Well, yeah, it's definitely, like, obviously, like with my dad constantly pestering me, and this church being really close, I think that there was like there was something that God was doing in the midst of it, like, and probably one of the reasons I like to party so much is because it blocks out a lot, It's good for that. So when you don't have anything, you're like, okay, let's just wash it away, right?
Yeah.
So I think that there was like a tug already going on, I think that like God was kind of reaching out to me in different ways. There's some different stories and stuff of God moving, but I don't know if it's even pertinent to share. But like God had been moving for there was no change in my life, but like God had been speaking to me in a few different like kind of outworldly ways, and I didn't know what to do with it,
Like what's an example?
Okay. So, well, my wife hates this story, but I guess I'll tell it.
Okay, if it's bad, I'll just edit it out. So go for it.
Okay, cool. At one point, I ended up renting like a back room from somebody in Westminster, right? And this was just a few months before I lived on Almond. And my brother was like living with me. He'd come in and stay with me and leave or whatever. And he was working with me a little bit. And we were sitting in the room drinking, and he has a lot of experience going from hotel to hotel. And, in hotels they have Bibles, right?
Yeah.
awesome. And he would be in a hotel and he would pull out the Bible and ask God a question, and there'd be a line on the page. He'd open it and it'd be like an answer from the Lord or from God. When he'd open it, it was like conversating with God, he said. And I was like, well, let's do it, And so we're drinking there, and we pull out a Bible, which I had from my grandma, of course. I always had the Bible with me, which is funny. I didn't really read it, but my grandma gave me a Bible with my name on it, so I felt like
you can't throw it away or
use it. Yeah, it was like some special thing, right? Yeah. So I pull out the Bible, and we had the TV on, and the TV shuts off, and I go and try and turn it on, unplug it, and I can't get the TV back on. So we're like, whatever. So we start doing it, and we're asking God questions, like, why did this happen with my mom, and what's going on here, and why this or why that, and with a dark line on a page, we'd open it, and it was like speaking to us, and we were kind of like blown away, like we're kind of having fun with it, and then like slowly after like probably 45 minutes of doing it. We kind of drifted away from it and just started talking about other stuff. And then the TV turns back on and everything was normal again. And we just continue on doing whatever we were doing. So I don't know why I remember that so well, but that was like a few months before I met my wife and a few months before I gave my life to Jesus. But that was like one of the things that like happened. Another one was like my wife was, me and her were talking on the phone when I was living in Almond, and I was struggling, because like the life that I live versus the life that God calls you to live are completely different, right?
Yeah.
And so me and my wife were on the phone, and she was like, I just feel like there's like a spirit on you, and she's like a beautiful like demon is like wrapped around you from behind, and like I can see like her face next to yours, and I could feel like breath on my neck, and we started praying, and as we start praying and asking Jesus for help, a shadow goes across my apartment and out through the kitchen, and the front door opens and slams, and it just felt empty, and it was like another like one of those like, what is going on here, and like the place just felt empty after that, and we were praying, and I started crying,
Yeah.
And just like don't know, like what do you do,
What do you do now?
Yeah. So like things like that were happening, that was like a couple of the things, and then like I started opening up God's Word. And I would read something, and it was alive, Like one of the first things I was reading was the Sermon on the Mount. And at this point, I was living on that garage floor with my mom moved in, my little sister, my brother, everybody was in, right? We were all just packed into this little tiny place. And I'm making everybody listen to the Sermon on the Mount. And my mom's like, yeah, I've heard this before. And I was like, no, do you guys not understand what he's saying, And it's just like, for whatever reason, like the words of Jesus were like just hitting me in such a different way than anything ever, Like I was just coming alive, and it was awesome. And there was just like all these experiences I was having with the Lord at that time, and he was just moving in awesome ways, and like every little step forward, he was like encouraging me, okay, and then I guess we can go back to like meeting my wife. So I know that one of my buddies hit me up, and we're like the circle. I go to the circle all the time at the Orange Circle, and that was like our stomping grounds, we'd go play pool and drink and party and do whatever, So one of the nights I'm out there, and I got totally blasted and don't remember anything, but I get home, and this is my version of the story because this is how I wake up in the morning, and I get a text message from a number I don't recognize, and it says, don't you hate when you give out your number to girls and then you don't remember them the next day? And I was like, oh, it's horrible, like thought it was one of my buddies messing with me or something. And then so that message, like, file it away, whatever. I'm not feeling too great because of all the partying. So the best cure for that is to start partying again, right? So I go next door, excuse me, to my neighbors, and we're watching hockey, and I'm just thinking about that text message. I'm like, well, what's going on with that? It's kind of interesting, you know, like who is that? And eventually I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna call. And I called, and she was actually in her car driving from San Diego to Orange, so she had some time, you know, and we ended up talking on the phone for 2 hours, you know, like her whole drive. And we ended up getting off the phone because my buddy was picking me up to go out, and he showed up, but we just talked straight for 2 hours. And there was like an instant connection. Like it was really cool. I don't know how or why, but we just like connected like instantly, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to get to know this person better. I want to know this person, you know? No talk about Jesus, nothing like that. It was just me and her talking, right? And so then she's like, you know, I'm like, I don't even know what this girl looks like, right? And one of the funny things is back then I had a flip phone, like the Nokia flip phone, and it had like a little picture, you know, and she had like probably like an iPhone 2 or something, you know, nothing too cool, but she was like, oh, just go on Facebook and you can see what I look like. And I was like, dude, I don't know. I can't go on Facebook on my phone. It just doesn't work, you know? Send me a picture of you. So she sends me a picture of her, and it's a full room and her standing in like the room in the picture. So on my little phone, it's like that big of a person, you know? So I have no idea what this girl is. Yeah. I, like, it could be a guy for all I know. That's how tiny it was. But then, so we got moving forward in our relationship, and we decided to have a first date after talking for a while, you know, like maybe 2 nights. Talking a lot, and then we had a date. She was kind enough to come meet me at Paul's, a bar in the Circle, and I don't know why, but I just started talking to her about the Bible, you know, and she was like, I don't know why you keep bringing this up, you know, what are you doing? So, and then that's kind of our courtship was kind of messy, you know. I guess you could say.
You ended up married.
Yeah.
How soon after you met her were you guys engaged and then married?
So, you know, I like right literally probably after the first time that I met her, I was like so excited, you know, after we met face to face. I was like, I thought that she was the one, you know?
Just right away.
Right away. Like first time meeting her, I was like super interested just talking to her on the phone. And then when we met and we like went out and had like a date together, and I mean, it wasn't really even a date. It was just like we met with like I had friends there and stuff. And I like knew, you know, like this girl, I want this girl. And then as I guess as time kind of went by, like maybe like a week after knowing each other, I think that I probably was already starting to tell her, you know, and I think that she started feeling the same way too, and it was like super quick, right? But it was like, I don't know, it's so cliche, but it's like when you know, you know.
Yeah.
And she obviously was like a lover of Jesus, you know, and I.
Where along the line did you just decide I'm gonna follow Jesus?
So. I didn't have like a clear, definitive, like I would like be like, I like Jesus and then I'm going to live for him. And then like I would do something stupid and like kind of live the way I was living or go out drinking, or everybody that I knew was like, we'd just party together and that's what we would do together, you know? So I kind of like was walking through like the mud for a while. And still like I started coming here. Me and my wife, when we came here, probably like a month after knowing each other, we were going to Rock Harbor,
okay,
and then we came here, and she had like a vision of me getting saved here. Like when she came that first time here, she had like a whole vision of it, you know?
So she knew that you were going to meet Jesus right here.
Well, she didn't know like here specifically. She had actually a vision of me getting prayed over by the men of the Friday morning prayer group too. And like the clothes I was wearing and everything. But she didn't tell me about any of this stuff. She told my dad at that first service, and him and my just met girlfriend are crying in the parking lot. Well, he's crying. She's like telling him, like, the Lord told me like to tell you what I saw, And so like, I'm like, what the heck is going on here, Yeah. But anyway, I when I actually like decided to draw the line in the sand and give my life to Jesus, like publicly, was sitting down here on a Wednesday, and Pastor Scott was teaching, and I did and I don't know exactly what day it was. I know I was 26, and I know it was, I knew the gravity of it,
Yeah.
Like I knew that there was like a difference between like, I don't know, like letting God come after you all the time and then finally saying yes, and I said yes that day, and then I felt different after that, I felt it's like I just felt different in some way, and then we kept going to church, and we stayed at Rock Harbor for a while, and I was still struggling. Like I wasn't able to just like, God says, smoking's got to go, get rid of that. God says drinking. I couldn't do it like that,
Yeah.
I don't know why. It was really hard for me to quit all those things. But like I knew that the Lord was like tugging on me, right? And one day I was at a service at Rock Harbor, and they were talking about how like you've been set free, but you're still tangled in the chains. I like felt like the Holy Spirit was like dragging me up there, right? And I got up, and like they do an altar call, and I'm like coming around the side, and then like I get right to the edge, and these people in the front row just look at me, and I was like, all right, and I turned around, and I walked away, right? Yeah, I was like, oh gosh, don't look at me, guys. So anyway, I like a week later, I go to the Friday morning men's thing, and I'm telling the guys like I just feel like I'm just trapped, And I told them what happened. And Pastor Danny was like, well, let's pray for you right now. And they put a chair in the middle of the group, and everybody prayed over me. And then my wife was like, everyone prayed over you today? And she's like, what were you wearing? And I was like, oh, I was wearing a gray shirt. What? And she was like, I saw that happen. It happened, and it, like, so, and then, what's funny is like, I did get set free of like almost everything. I was able to set down everything for a good amount of time.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's incredible. And so that was 10 years ago, more or less?
That was 10 years ago.
Yeah. So what is, I think maybe big picture, and then we can zoom in on a couple topics, but what was your initial experience after that of like, because you had said so much that you were trying to drown out so many things. Mm-hmm. You used the word hopeless like over and over and over. I always felt like for me, I became a Christian for real when I was like maybe 16 and a half, somewhere along there. And I always felt like I didn't know that I was lost. I knew things were not okay, and I was doing them anyways. I had like a conscience, but I always felt like, when you wake up in the middle of the night and you've been in your house long enough, you don't need, it could be as dark as can be, and you could like literally navigate like to the bathroom, the kitchen, and back, your eyes closed. Mm-hmm. I felt like the lights came on, and I had been walking around, and I knew my way around what I thought life was. Mm-hmm. And the lights came on, and it was like, whoa, there's like other rooms. So I'm just curious, what was your experience like in those early moments? Was it like immediately I have hope, everything is completely different, or what was it like?
Dude, it was crazy. Like my eyes were open to that. Like we're in a spiritual battle, for our souls. Like, and at least for my soul. Like when I was like, I was like, it's real. The Bible's true. God is real. Jesus is real. The devil is real. All this, everything in here is real, And it's like when you're on the fence about it, or like you have an idea of it, and you don't really know for sure. Like, it's like, okay, yeah, like almost like it's fantastical, or whatever. It's like but when you find out like it's real, like everything in there is real and you're experiencing it, and it's mind blowing, it kind of just like wrecks you, because then it's like everything you kind of like use as a coping strategy or you thought you knew isn't necessarily what's true, like, and it's like, what the heck, like, cause when without a shadow of a doubt that Jesus came and he died for you and then he rose again, and then like that is the truth, like it's like, how did I not know? How does everybody not know this truth? Like, I don't know, like you just like feel like everybody needs to know this.
Yeah. And you definitely are one of those guys who lives like it.
Oh, well, thank you.
No, I sincerely mean that. You tell a lot of people about Jesus a lot of the time.
Yeah. Well, dude, obviously I'm not much without him, so it's kind of got to give credit where credit's due.
Yeah, 100%. I think what will be really interesting is this probably won't go live for a couple months because we're going to do some things with it, but I think you'll be blown away by how many people approach you and are like, I had no idea. You'll probably get people who are like, I've been quietly suffering without telling anyone, and it's the same as many of the things. Tell me more about being free.
Well, so like the freedom part is like that, like everything on this side of eternity, right? It's like the purpose and the hope that God places inside of you. And even like, it's funny because I was so mind blown by it. I'll tell a small story to kind of illustrate it. And I almost feel like I didn't even fit in at church right away, because I was like on like cloud 10, I'm like way up there, and then like I'm like, all these people, like it's almost normal to them, and I'm like, this is not normal, like it's not normal. And so like I had like a stroller left over from Jaden that like he outgrew. And I put it on Craigslist or whatever app back then to sell. And this girl like hit me up and she was like, oh, I really need it. And it's like $10 or something like that, And I was like, okay. She's like, I can't get there right now. I'm going into my second job and all this, right? So I was like going through the Bible and I'm like, okay, I'll leave it here. I have to go to church. But I'm going to leave the stroller here and then you can just stick money in the mailbox or whatever. But then instead of like telling her to pay me, I put a Bible and I underlined a verse, and I can't remember the verse, right? But I underlined the verse and I leave it open inside the stroller in front where she can grab it, And I go to church that night, and that's what they're teaching on at church is that verse, right? And I'm like mind blown. So after the service, I go up to the pastor that was teaching, and I was like, dude, you don't understand. I was just reading this verse. I just left it. And he was like looking at me like I was a crazy person, And I was like, what am I
connecting the dots that God is real, and he's just like, cool.
Yeah. So then I was like, oh, I maybe I'm doing something wrong,
Yeah.
But anyway, so that is like, so it's like, it's kind of, it's when your whole world gets flipped upside down, it's a lot to kind of take in,
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, so I think where we could go from here is I think so often people receive Jesus, and as you're talking, you just start experiencing freedom, hope, and the lights are turning on, and just living on fire for Him. But so often I think people get stuck in, okay, well, God has redeemed my soul, I belong to Him, I'm going to live for Him. But sometimes kind of like the reality, maybe the rubble or the chaos that you've created in life takes a little bit longer to slowly get ironed back out.
Yeah.
Like your life around you has to kind of be ripped down to the foundation. You like that construction guy?
Yes,
like that metaphor?
I do.
Yeah, you got to get ripped all the way down and then rebuilt. And I think sometimes people get really caught in that part because they're expecting, now that I belong to Jesus, that everything's going to be great.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about just God putting your life back together, tearing it down, and then the slow rebuild, because the guy you are right now is not even remotely close to the guy you were. The dad that you are, that everyone sees, is probably not the dad that you were.
Yeah.
Talk about some of the things and maybe the pivotal moments of just discipleship of following Jesus every day as those things begin to grow and build.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a life of just, sorry about that. It's a life of like, it's not like all of a sudden everything's but and then it is too in some regards, right? Because I really did get set free from a lot of things, and then when all the guys prayed over me, and I was like free from a lot of things for a couple of years, and then I fell back into some stuff too, and I got tangled back into things that I shouldn't have never did. Maybe getting like cocky or just not appreciating what the Lord had done, and being an addictive person, like feeling like I'm not getting the same Holy Spirit stuff during worship, and where's that, and seeking after that. But so like I always had I felt like a good idea that God is like supernaturally natural, and like if I have hope now, and that was like the biggest part of the equation. Like, we can do all things through Christ, right? So if you believe that, then you have hope, like if we can endure anything with him, then it's like the success or whatever, and whatever you're trying to go after kind of follows suit in my mind. It's like that's not necessarily the goal. So the like I guess I'm kind of lost on the question again. So
just like so you end up getting married, right? And you start building a life of being a Christian husband. Then you already had Jaden, but now you're like dipping your toe in the water of, well, now I'm a Christian who's a father.
Yeah.
What were those early kind of times like, as you're really kind of learning who you are in Christ while also having like your identity switched and being transformed by him?
Yeah. So, it's really kind of a position that like I was already in that like became much more important,
like priority.
Yeah. And just the I mean, the love that Jaden could experience from me, it was completely different, I wouldn't even say I was giving him any love before that, even though I loved him, but it wasn't like genuine, true, like good love, that he needed. So thank God it was a rescue mission for him, like to be raised in a home that's full of love for him. But it like changed the like my perspective of Jaden too, like, and like how God sees him and how I want to be able to see him, and how to like find the gifts inside of him and care for him and love him and nurture him, and provide for him.
Yeah.
And take on the responsibility of being a father. It is like I was charged for that, Like I felt like that was something that I wanted to do, more than anything else,
Yeah.
Like that became a priority, and like I mean, that's the shift, right? It's like I was living for nothing, had no hope, and then like all of a sudden, like I have hope, and I want Jaden to experience hope, and I want to be a good father. I want to, do the right thing, be upright, say the right things, like just encourage him and be a good man and a good example for him, like, which I didn't really care for that before, like as much, like maybe as far as the world would consider a good man, but like a godly man is like became my goal as a model for him, and really just trying to learn all of that together, because my parenting skills have changed so much since, because he was 3, now he's 15
in high school, dude.
Yeah, I know, and it's like I almost feel like I owe him a apology, because I've learned so much in the past 12 years, but and God's like been so faithful to teach me how to do things with him as time goes on,
Yeah.
and how to pray for him, and how to even reach him, because we're like different personalities too. So it's like just being able to connect with them, and and be a good influence for him, like has been something that the Lord's still teaching me today,
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, most people know, but Jaden's not your only kid anymore.
No.
You went from 1 to 4 here pretty quick.
Yes, yeah. So we're professionals by the time Koa came around now, Dude, it's like chaos now. There's just so many kids.
We always say when the kids are screaming, like we're on a walk, like Shepherd will be screaming, Colton will be yelling something at me, and I'll just look at Natalie, and our phrase is, I just love the soundtrack of life.
Right?
You watch enough of those movies, and you think there's supposed to be like quiet piano playing in the background with leaves and these 2 young, beautiful children. It's just chaos.
Mm-hmm. Constantly.
Yeah. How is this a mess? I just cleaned this up.
Right? Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. So you have twins. We are lucky enough to have your twins and my son are almost exactly the same age. Mm-hmm. Then Koa and Shepherd are like literally within a week of each other. Yep. So it's been so cool. I think I've told you this lots of times, but I love talking with you. And, like sometimes you enter a conversation, but you also like experience the gift and the blessing of some of the other stuff that you weren't intending to talk about.
Yeah.
I always take mental notes when you start telling me about your kids, because I'll think like, oh, I should try that. I should try that with my kid. Or like you're telling me a funny story, and then I'll just, in my mind, I should avoid doing that.
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of raising kids, in a tight-knit church where people know each other and love each other.
Oh, dude, totally.
So you're talking about being a father. What is it like to meet Jesus, be transformed, belong to him, and then immediately become a husband? What would you say to maybe like a young couple who's freshly married or thinking about giving it a go?
Oh, man. For me, the things that really matter in our our union is the main thing is Jesus, right?
Yeah.
I don't mean that in I know it sounds cliche, but it's so true. It's so true how important to stay close to the Lord, and then all the good things kind of flow out of that, where your relationship won't be as tense, or the rough times won't be as rough, and the good times you'll have a good perspective of it, So I really think that the being that cord of 3 is what we say, right? Yeah. It's not easily broken, and Jesus being that third cord is really, really fundamental for us. Because I mean that I mess up all the time, right? And my wife doesn't beat me because she knows that I'm a work in progress and that Jesus is working on me, right? And it's it's a good perspective to have, because to extend grace to one another, and because you're gonna have trouble, right? It's it's not smooth sailing.
What would you say, let's just hypothetically say there's a couple, they've been married 3 or 4 months, and they're trying to figure out, we know who we are separate of one another. Mm-hmm. We want to follow Jesus, but what? So often people will tell me, we're just having a really hard time finding a rhythm of doing it together.
Yeah.
If you could just speak into that situation, what would you say is a good place to start? And maybe some ways of probably don't do that.
Yeah, I really think that just pulling the Band-Aid off and doing it, because there will be times when you just make excuses and you're I'm not going to do it. I would set a time to pray and read the Bible with your spouse, I think that's important. To just follow through with that, have dates, as much as you can. But I think that communication is really important, and speaking about your heart to one another and where you're at,
Yeah.
Because that for me it changes, depending on what's going on in my life, so just being really really well at communicating with each other,
Yeah.
And knowing each other really well, that like your wife is an extension of you, right? So you guys are one flesh, and I think that the way that you take care of your wife is a reflection of how you feel about yourself. And like laying your life down for your wife is like something that every man that loves Jesus has to do.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, it's like a good Christian thing to get married, because you do have to die to yourself, right? But it's good for you.
Yeah.
You know, it's really good for you. And I think that putting your spouse in front of you, it like might be difficult to like squash what you want, but it's definitely beneficial to give you what you want in the long term.
Yeah.
You know, and which is a healthy marriage. And I think that's like super important, is like trying to I think Pastor Danny said, fill up your spouse's cup, you know?
Yeah.
Like is the way he put it. But I think that putting them first, you know?
I like what you said about your wife, Sam is her name. Sam, that you said she treats you like you're a work in progress because you are one.
Mm-hmm.
I think so often we recognize I'm a work in progress, but my spouse needs to do better or something like that. And I think sometimes we can get caught in these really terrible, like, I always say it's like the pinball machine. You know, when the pinball gets stuck in the top, and that's how you get like mega points.
Yeah.
Like, back and
Ding,
forth.
ding, ding.
I feel like you can get stuck in these seasons of like forgetting that I'm a work in progress and expecting or demanding something of someone else that if they demanded that of you,
you wouldn't measure
you
up.
would be like, you just expect me to be perfect.
Yeah.
I feel like that for us has been the biggest thing over time as we've experienced celebrations and terrible things and all the stuff in between, is just, you know what? We're going to make it through this because we made it through everything by God's grace. In the meantime, let's just give each other grace to be a work in progress.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's good.
So you're a dad, you're a husband, but like I already alluded to it, you're a business owner.
I am.
Which is full circle from working at Bed Bath & Beyond and putting down artificial turf.
Yes.
Cornerstone Construction is laid on a solid foundation. Tell me and tell people who are going to listen about not just what you do and how you do it today, but how did you come to a point where you went from, like you were telling us some of the jobs you had, to you now not only own your own company, but you literally employ other people, build awesome, beautiful things. Tell us about the process of that.
A lot of grace, a lot of grace from Jesus. So the way that it kind of came about for me, and knowing that like I didn't really want to be in construction when I was younger, and then it became like my bad. It became kind of the path that was what the Lord had for me, right? And so I worked for a few different like construction companies, bouncing around for different people, seeing the way that other people did it, trying to serve them well. Like this was before and after I gave my life to Jesus. And then one of the companies that I was working for, I messed up, and they were like, you know what, we don't really need your services anymore. And then and this was probably like 2 years after accepting the Lord, and I was like, where do I go from here, you know?
Yeah.
And my wife knew somebody that had a commercial construction company, and she was like, oh, can you give him a job? And I was, as a favor, they were like, okay, we'll give him a job, right? So I was kind of like the mutt for the company, and I would do whatever they asked me to do and run around and kind of supplement in any way I could at different projects. And they were like a big commercial construction company, so a lot of their projects were like building parking structures and medical office buildings and TV stations and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah.
So it was such an awesome experience for me to learn. Even though I was the mutt, you know, in the company, I was literally like the last guy. Like, you know, like they're just like, you're here because your wife, basically, kind of a thing. And I got to learn so much though. Like I tried to use it as a time to learn a lot, you know?
Yeah.
And
It's so important. I think people forget that.
yeah.
You feel like you're in a job you don't want to be in, and you lose sight of like, I could be learning something.
Yeah. Well, and it like looking back, it was like such a gift from the Lord. Like I wasn't making any money, and it was like experience time that like I wouldn't have gotten elsewhere, you know, like it was, I was learning how to read plans by going to the superintendent's desk and reading them when he wasn't around, you know, like, and just like making like connections with all the people that come on the job site, trying to tell them about Jesus, and then learning their trade from them, you know?
Yeah.
Cause I never really had like a mentor, you know, I never had somebody that was like, hey, like take you under your wing or whatever. Like, let me show you something. I feel like I never really had that, you know? And, so I was trying to figure out everything and trying to learn how to do stuff, and, you know, and working at it. And so working at that company, they started giving me more responsibilities and let me started superintending some jobs and stuff for them. And then, I was working for them for a couple years, and then they were like, okay, we got this job up in what is it? It's Mount High is like there was a YMCA boy and girl camp, right?
Okay, yeah.
And they're like, it's one of their clients. I did like a facility for them in Marietta, back in Marietta for them, and they wanted to fix up the camp, and they were like, we'll give you double your pay to go up there, right? Which, because it was far, and I'm like, okay.
Sure.
I'm like, cool. So I went and did it, and that afforded me the money to actually go out and get my own license and start the company. And then, so we finish up there. I get my license, you know, and we're really seeking the Lord on what to do and what the next steps were, because I knew I wasn't really going anywhere with that company. Like they weren't like necessarily grooming me to take any positions. They were just like, hey, if we have a need that you can fill it, you know?
Yeah.
And that's it. But then I made enough money to get my license, and that company actually closed its doors like the day after I got my license, you know?
Wow.
It, like shut down, and it was kind of crazy timing, fortuitous, I guess the word is, right?
That's a good word.
Yeah, it was probably from my wife. So then I started Cornerstone, and then I've still been learning, you know, ever since starting. And but that job before gave me like a lot of experience and confidence that like even on these big like $30 million projects, like they all go up the same, you know, and like starting to get an understanding of like construction as a whole, and like a critical path method and stuff like that, and the business side of things, and just trying to figure stuff out, you know? So it was just a gift from God to learn, you know?
Yeah, I know. I mean, full disclosure, you've done a little work in my own home. I always think of you actually because you tore out a wall and in the process had to tear up the wood floor. I'll never forget, Colton was obsessed with power tools at the time. He's still pretty obsessed with them, but
My man.
you let him hammer some things, and then I'll never forget, you told him, hey, you want to write some Bible verses with me on your concrete? You remember that? Yeah, and it was just such a cool moment to feel like, you know, this is what the body of Christ does. I try to pour into him and teach him and pray with him and read him his Bible, but like you turn around and your friend's like, hey, also, you want to do some Bible? So I think you had written, as for this house, we will follow the Lord. It's written right underneath where our family gathers. It's our family room.
Yeah.
And I always think of that. Like, I think I'm sitting like right where that's
On the foundation.
written.
Yeah.
Yeah, right on the foundation. But I know something about you is, you know, people, and lately I've been having all kinds of stuff. I've had different services and contractors in my home, and you can figure out really quick which people are looking at you as a dollar figure, and which people are looking at you as a human with a problem they can solve. And of course, they're in business to make money, so they're not giving their service away.
Yeah.
But you can tell the difference immediately. And everyone I know that you've worked with or for all says the same thing, that you're the latter. You're someone who thinks of the person.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about, I just know how God works. You were telling me a story, maybe you could tell it, of just randomly all the subcontractors all there at the same day and praying together. I think that was last week. But just tell us some stories about how God uses a business.
Yeah. It's like I work at a Christian company. I think that, like, just as a believer, and someone that's fired up about the Lord and the amount of forgiveness that He's given me, I want to extend that love to other people as much as I can, and everybody's like made in the image of God, right? So, and they have these awesome characteristics and stuff that you can see like God's handiwork in, and it's like. I really believe that every single client that I have is teaching me something, probably first of all, right? Like teaching something that's wrong with me, like maybe knocking a chip off the old block, that needs to go. Teaching me patience or something like that. But I think it's an opportunity to get into somebody's home and pray for them. And sometimes it's open and sometimes it's not, depending on the person and what you feel led to do. But we get like a unique perspective because I'm just the construction guy, right? So it's like I get some pretty honesty from people, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I've failed miserably tons of times in so many different ways, but like I especially recently, I feel like we've hit a stride of being able to pray over clients in so many awesome ways. The story that you were talking about, there's these tile guys that all showed up to work on a project that I'm working on, and one of them was all excited because he's about to get his license, and he was talking about it, and I was like sharing some of this stuff for me, and one of the guys was like, "Oh, he sounds like a brother," and so we start talking, and then and lo and behold, by the end of the day, we're like praying over each one of them, and their future, and like bringing hope back to them.
Yeah.
Like God's hope to like for their future. And these are some old crusty tile guys, right? They've been around the block for a long time, so I felt like they needed some hope, like to know that God's still moving on their behalf, and we were able to pray, and I know that everybody was leaving there different than when they came,
Yeah.
A little like encouragement from the Lord. Or like I'm just finishing up a tattoo salon or a permanent makeup salon down the street here on Tustin.
I'm not tracking what's a tattoo salon.
Or a permanent makeup. So they like do eyebrows, like for like ladies and stuff.
Like the tattooed permanent.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I know what you're talking about.
I wouldn't expect you to know. I don't really know. I'm just saying it like I know because I have no idea.
Frequented the makeup salon.
I heard that it's not actually permanent. It's only a few months that it lasts. But anyway, like we were able to pray over the owner of that, and and just come to find out her story a little bit, and how she's actually a child of God, and she's not going to a church because she's got kind of the church hurt thing going on, and so like God brought His church there, and I just I don't know. I think that like I'm not the best contractor, like I'm not the worst contractor either,
Make sure people know. They see this on YouTube. Yeah. I'm not the worst, I promise.
Yeah, I'm definitely not. But I do have the Spirit of God in me, Yeah. And he moves, and especially when you allow Him to. Yeah. And obviously I need to make money to take care of my family. But that's like just a cheap way of being a Christian, right? Like we have so much more to offer, all of us, because God's inside of us, and we're called according to His purposes, which provision is awesome, but I think that there's more to it,
Yeah, I love that. It's not as straightforward and linear as I'm going to work to make money. Yeah. I love what you said too, because I think a lot of Christians, they know like my faith should be an action, but I love what you started with was not I have God in me, so I have something to offer, but that God has something to teach me through the people.
Yeah.
I meet. I think sometimes we get like so gung ho, we just think like maybe subtly we start to think I'm Jesus. I can do something for other people.
Yeah.
What a great
crazy.
reminder it is to pause and recognize that the Spirit of God made people made in His image are going to teach you something.
Yeah.
Even if it's a total pain in the butt person, is going to teach you patience.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've had some of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, I'm totally tracking with you, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think we can kind of head for the finish line, but I'm curious. I think you've lived a lot of life.
yeah, I got a lot of miles on me, man.
I think there's one way you could say that as like oh man, I got a lot of miles on me. But redeemed by the Lord, having a lot of miles on you gives you wisdom. I think people will say like you are wise beyond your years. That's a phrase we throw around, but I think it's true of you.
Thank you.
And I just open-ended. What would you say to just like a young guy? I don't know, maybe a kid coming out of high school floundering, feeling like there's not any hope. I'm not really sure what to do. I get it. Maybe I should go to church. What would you just say to a kid?
Well, give your life to Jesus, obviously, like that, because literally you're not going to have too much success in anything if you're a child of God and you haven't done that, you know? Like that's the most important thing, obviously. And then from there, like I feel like He directs your steps when you start to acknowledge Him and everything. And it's not like instantly like, this is the way I should go, you know, like I'm constantly trying to figure stuff out. But like the Bible's really clear that God has a purpose for everyone that trusts in Him.
Amen.
You know, like and it's a good thing, you know, and it's the best thing. It's tailor suited for you. And so like hopping on board with God is definitely the best way to experience all that life has to give you and be impactful, you know, and not just like in other people's lives, but in your own life. Like God will like literally make you a better version of you, you know, like He'll get rid of the stuff that which isn't fun, by the way, always, sometimes it is, but He'll get rid of all the stuff that needs to go, you know, and then you become a better version of yourself too, with Christ in you. So I would say that like if you give your life to Jesus and seek His will for your life, you know, and acknowledge Him, that like everything changes. Everything gets better. Even if it's not great, it's still better than it was without Him.
Yeah.
At least in my case, I'm nothing without the Lord, you know? So it's like it's kind of clear for me, you know, but if you do think you're something, give your life to Jesus and see what happens, you know?
Yeah.
I would say that, you know, like it's really just following Him and that's the most important and fulfilling thing that you can do.
Amen to that. Do you ever reflect back and just think of where you've come from and where you are now, how in many ways your kids will not grow up in the way that you had to?
That's like one of the best things about like what God has done for me, you know, like is that like my kids won't even know, you know, they won't grow up in a home that's constantly moving, that's like all over the place, you know, that's just like your parents are one thing in the morning and another thing at night, and they're like that curse is broken in my home, you know.
So awesome.
It is. It's a like a gigantic deal, you know. Like it's like to have Jesus in your home is like there's like nothing that compares, you know. And to be able to bring up my children in that is, it's like probably the best gift, you know. Like it's like on this side, you know.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, you worship every Sunday, and your dad worships with you. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes I call you up and your dad's working with you. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure there's still things to be worked out, but God's redeeming even that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. My dad started working with me we're coming up on a year in a few months, which we've worked before together in the past, you know, but now like we've had some good times together in the past year, and like, and I love my dad so much, you know, like he is such a blessing in my life, you know, and God has totally redeemed redeem that like beyond measure, you know. Like if you like transplanted us back like 25 years ago and looked at the like debauchery going on and then go to now, it's like how else other than Jesus, you know. Like it doesn't even make sense that we would be walking in such a way, you know, like today.
Yeah, your dad is a man for God. I mean, my most recent story is I saw some people up here at the altar praying on Sunday, and I decided, I want to come pray over someone, and I got there at the end, and I'm like, oh, it's already over. That's kind of a bummer. That's cool. And then your dad pretty much just put that big, strong hand on my back and pushed me into the middle and told me, we're praying for you now.
Yep.
It sounds by the tone of your voice, I don't have a choice, so sounds good.
You know, and like that's like one of his gifts is just to be so brazen, you know, and it makes it so people don't miss, you know, like it forces them to kind of get in the mix of things, you know, and he's got a lot of gifts, but I love that like he has no shame, you know.
You know, it's such a breath of fresh air because I think so many people get caught up in, they're kind of like debilitated with like, I want to share or I want to pray for someone, but I don't want to do it wrong. And they get so anxious about it, they do nothing.
Yeah.
It's, I feel like that's so common. So when you meet someone who's like, I'm going to pray for you. What's the worst thing that can happen? Close your eyes. Let's do this.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
It's refreshing.
Yeah. But hey, as we wrap up, I don't always do this, but I was thinking about you, and I feel like God put this on my heart, so I wanted to read this because it's a scripture that is close to me, but it's also close to you. It's what your company is built on. But I want to read it, and then I just wanted to share with you something. Maybe it's for someone listening, but I feel like God put this on my heart for you. It says, this is Jesus speaking, "Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like the wise man who builds his house on a rock. The rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat at the house, but it didn't fall because it had been founded on a rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on sand. And when the rain fell and the floods came, the winds blew and beat against the house, it fell. It was a great fall at that." And I was thinking, so often I've read that, and this is like brand new. I've never thought of it this way until 2 days ago. I always thought like there are people who build their house on sand, and there are people who build their house on the rock in the end. And it dawned on me as I was thinking about this conversation is you can build your house on the sand, and when it falls down, you can move and build your house on the rock the next time. And I feel like so many people somehow feel like maybe I'm like a second-class Christian. Or maybe I'm not like the full thing because my house used to be on the sand and I'm embarrassed to talk about it. One of my favorite things about you is you're never embarrassed to talk about anything because Christ in you is like full freedom. You just say it how it is always. I feel like my encouragement...
It's not always good, by the way.
Well, discretion. It works in progress.
Yes.
But I think the thing I was taking away from you, and I've been trying to pray and keep in mind that we're having a conversation, but I'm aware now that a lot of these conversations have meant something to other people. And I just feel like what I know about you and what I know about other people who might listen is maybe there's people who are built on the sand and they know it and they just don't know what to do. You can move. You could find a good rock and say, God, I want to build right here, and God will build.
Amen.
And that's what you've done, not just philosophically with a company slogan, but you've done that with your real life. And I've seen your life up close and personal for many years. You are built on a very solid rock, and it's not going anywhere.
No, I appreciate that.
I appreciate you coming on. Any guesses how long we've been talking?
An hour?
I think we're pushing an hour and a half now, man.
Hour and a half?
Yeah, shout out. This coffee's way better than episode 1. So it made out good.
Cool.
Appreciate having you. And I'm excited to hear what people have to say and how many relationships happen because people are going to approach you and say, hey, I watched that and that meant a lot to me. So thanks for doing it.
Well, thank you for having me, Andy. I appreciate you, brother.
Awesome.